Good evening and good afternoon, depending on where you are in the country right now. And assalamu alaikum to you all. Welcome to CCMW's Delete Digital Hate in Conversation series. We are going to begin shortly. Before we do that, I'd like to do a land acknowledgement, please. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional territories of the peoples of Turtle Island. The sacred land on which some of us are gathered today has been a site of human activity for 15,000 years. We acknowledge the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today, the meeting place of Toronto, or Takaronto, is still the home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island. I know that it's become kind of a formality to do land acknowledgements, but as part of being a settler on this land, I've learned that first of all, the Indigenous peoples welcomed us. In Islam, we also believe that we are the stewards of this land and we should take care of it the way you take care of your families because it has so many living creatures on it, so many things to preserve. And that's something that's being taught to us by the Indigenous peoples. So wherever you may be across Canada, please do think about your location and what we owe to the Indigenous peoples of this land. Thank you. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about our series that we are engaged in right now. Just to let you know that the Delete Digital Hate project is funded by the Canadian government, the Department of Canadian Heritage, and it aims to combat the surge in hate crimes in Canada, especially online hate and extremism. It focuses on empowering Canadian Muslim girls, women, and non-binary individuals to address online harms targeted at them. As part of this project, these episodes that we are engaging in are focusing on online and digital hate, misinformation, and disinformation, and how we can counter these effectively. Now I'd like to introduce you to our presenter or to our host, but before I do that, this particular session is called In Conversation with Dr. Ahmed Al-Rawi, Manifestations of Digital Hate on Muslim Women. And now I'm going to introduce you to our host for the evening, Fatima Sayed. Fatima is a Mississauga-based journalist with the Narwhal, and it's an online publication that offers in-depth coverage of environmental and energy issues across Canada. She has worked and written for many publications, including Toronto Star, National Observer, and The Guardian and Chatelaine magazine, and she's well recognized as a journalist in this country. Next slide, please. And over to you, Fatima.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us this evening. I'm really excited to have another one of these conversations with you all. Joining me today is Dr. Ahmed Al-Rawi, who's an associate professor of news, social media, and public communication at the School of Communication at Simon Fraser University. He's also the founder of the Disinformation Project, and his research interests are related to news, global communication, misinformation, and social media with an emphasis on Canada and the Middle East. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Fatima, for inviting me. It's a great pleasure for me to be here and to talk and exchange some ideas. Thank you so much.
So for those members who might be joining us for the first time, or even if you've just repeated, I wanted to do a quick overview of what we've learned so far in this series because it is so powerful, and I would encourage you all to look up at some of those conversations. They are available on the CCMW website, including, and this one will be too. We started by learning a lot about what hate is, how it spreads, what kind of policies we need, really understanding it theoretically. Then we sort of looked at how young people interact with hate, and just the online space in general and the support that they need. We also spoke about social media platforms and their role in combating hate and, both their failures to do so and their successes, because there have been some wins, as we learned last week. Today, we're going to focus particularly on the Muslim community and how we interact with the online space, and how perhaps we are not just victims of hate, but also spreaders of hate sometimes, and the negative consequences of that. Um, I introduced Dr. Al-Rawi, but we do have another speaker. Her name is Amira. Um, she's not going to come on camera because she is a victim of hate. She's a student at a Canadian university. I'm not going to tell you which one, to protect her identity. And this setup really speaks to just the sheer impact hate can have, on an individual and a community level. And we're going to unpack that a little bit with both of our speakers. But I want to start with Dr. Al-Rawi. Um, Perhaps you can give us sort of a broad sense of your perspective on how hate has manifested against Muslims on social media, and what you've seen in your research over the years.
Thank you again. Hate on social media. I think if you trace hate, you will find it there from the beginning of the emergence of Islam. So I don't think social media is the catalyst, is the reason why we have hate today. There has been hate since the beginning, right? And we can look at the conflicts, the strifes, the clashes that happened between the Muslim world and the Christian world, and for a very long time. And you can also see when you read Edward Said's writings, as well as the literature from the 16th, 17th century, and so on, even back in the medieval times, you can see so many traces of hatred towards Islam. I have two PhDs. The first one was actually about the image of Islam in English literature. That was my first PhD. And when I looked at the history of it, it was filled with hate, filled with stereotyping, and you know, dehumanizing Muslims, not even regarding them as humans. And we can see like numerous, multiple references to Muslims being subhuman, if or not being human enough. So the emergence of social media definitely exacerbated the issue here. It's been there since the beginning, but now we see it spreading much faster, wider, and across different platforms in a way and a scale we have not seen before.
And particularly against Muslim women, right? Can you tell us a little bit about how you've tracked that, and what you've seen in that regard?
It's interesting because so my research is empirical, which means that I rely on the data or the evidence in order to offer or provide arguments, and of course provide some kind of discussions. Um, they There is a difference between what happens to Muslim men on social media versus Muslim women. And this difference could be described in terms of the quality more than the quantity of hate. So we did about a few studies, for example, looking at the differences between the way Muslim Canadian politicians and Muslim Canadian male Muslim Canadian politicians versus female Muslim Canadian politicians have been trolled on social media. When we look at the quantity, it was almost similar. But there was a difference, a very clear difference in terms of the quality of hate. So we see here that the hate directed at women is far more personal and far more gendered,
Mhm.
which means that they were not attacking the person, the woman politician, or as a politician. They were attacking the woman as a woman. So why are you even questioning the woman? Why are you even there in the political scene? So they were trying to discredit the female Muslim politician, specifically targeting personal issues like her looks, or the way she for example behaves, something we did not see, for instance, when the attacks were directed at men. When it comes to men, it was mostly about their work performance, the issues they tackle. But with women, it was more personal. We see this happening not only in Canada, but previous research also showed this happening elsewhere, even among non-Muslim female politicians. So the attacks tend to become more personal. And of course, Islamophobia has always been there. Islamophobia is in the background, always used in order to silence those politicians, cast doubt about their roles as politicians. And we know why. We know why this is happening. It's just because those people, the racists, do not want Muslim politicians to be even there in the political scene or in the public sphere. It's clear.
Yeah, and not just in the language, as you spoke about, but also I think just the sheer amount, right? Like it's both against Muslim women, as you mentioned, and I wanted to emphasize that as someone who's like seen this, who's observed this from afar, that for some reason females just get the brunt of hate. And I say for some reason, but psychologically, I think we can all guess why. I want to bring in a real life example of this for us to talk about so that we do have a reference point in this conversation. Because so often when we have these conversations, it's from a high level. And it's from sort of, a series of examples. But we have a speaker here with us today. Her name's Amira. That's not her real name, but again, we are protecting her identity because she is a victim of online hate. And Amira, I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit of how you've experienced online hate.
Yeah, sure. I have experienced online hate from both Muslim community spaces and non-Muslim communities as well, online, in person. They're very connected, in my opinion. You can't really separate the two. But I can give one particular example from within the community. So for context, I am an African student at a Canadian university. Um, at every university, there is something called the Muslim Student Association, which I'm sure many are familiar with. So they had approached some Black Muslims in the community, inviting them to form some sort of safe space and trying to be more inclusive and stuff. So they said yes, or we said yes, let's say. And at first it was nice, but very quickly, shortly after, we were met with resistance, resistance to even, like, we wanted to be in these Muslim spaces, but we were saying, hey, we actually need you to be a bit more inclusive, make it a bit more accessible. We gave some specific examples of how, but we were met with resistance and then gaslighting, and then it escalated over the span of some months into a wide-scale defamation and harassment campaign that was actually run by the group, with the support of external people. So, and it included all sorts of lies, such as like being from a different sect of Islam, which is not a problem, but they were trying to make it one. And also just saying that we're trying to fundamentally change the religion. So it put us on the defense with the community. And then it just kept getting worse. Like, the community kept dogpiling. People were barely checking in with us to see if these things were true. So the internet was a disaster, and it definitely impacted our day-to-day lives as well. Oh, I think you're muted, Fatima.
Thank you. Can you tell us a little bit about that to the extent that you're comfortable sharing about sort of how this impacted you personally?
Yeah, so the first thing was probably just overwhelming feelings of sadness and betrayal, because these are, Muslim community members. You'd think we have similar moral codes and expectations of how to treat each other. But to see that they were actually the perpetuators of this violence, and it wasn't even coming from external, like non-Muslims, it was, yeah, just a big sense of betrayal. Because we also saw, um, it wasn't just within the students, like this was going on throughout the whole city. Eventually, people from all over the country were paying attention to the situation, and it was like even the elders were participating in this. Elders and community leaders were participating in the bullying. Um, so it affected us by, like, some of us didn't go to school for a while because we physically did not feel safe to do so. Um, there were some events where we saw like men from all over the place kind of gather in one place, and that was really scary to see. So, it just takes one person to act on such extreme views. So, anyways, we didn't go to school for a while. A lot of us were just really nervous, and to the point where it consumes your whole thinking. We weren't sleeping properly. And if you're not sleeping and eating, it kind of gets hard to do everything else. So
Mhm.
yeah, it was really intense.
I'm sorry you went through that, and thank you so much for sharing. Dr. Al-Rawi, when he spoke about, seeing how it's sort of biased against women in particular, did you see some of that in what you experienced? Did you see people attacking
Yeah,
you because of your female Muslim identity and using that kind of language?
absolutely. It was very gendered. And the thing is, it was also layered with a lot of anti-blackness too. So that we couldn't even separate like the racism from the misogyny. It was so layered in the way that people were talking about us. Um, a lot of There's also this hyperfixation on like trying to control women. We've noticed. So even spaces that are meant for us to just exist, like as Muslim women on the internet, have been dominated. You see the comments just dominated by like men and their opinions that were never, never asked for them, but they're there. And it definitely happened with our case too. It was a lot of like extreme and drawing on Dr. Rawi's point. It was a lot of personal things that they were trying to bring into their criticisms that were, it wasn't even criticisms, it was just bullying, to be honest. But yeah, it was very gendered.
What is, Dr. Rawi, what is the broader impact of something like what Amira experienced? Like, do you
Mm,
see people leaving online spaces? Do you see,
mm.
um, you know, just people changing the ways they interact online and maybe offline as well because of hate?
Yeah, 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 definitely. And I'm talking about again data I gathered, research I conducted about these issues. So just if you allow me just to go back to the issue of quantity, I know you mentioned the quantity might be much more when it comes to the quantity of hate when it comes to attacks on Muslim women. It might be correct on different platforms. The problem with the research I have done was that I only looked at Twitter replies, which might not be, of course, representative of what happens online. So please remember
Mhm.
that we have plenty of other social media sites today. Actually, I gave a name for some of them, especially what we call the alternative social media sites, like BitChute, Gab, Parallel, and so on. I call them dark social sites or social media sites. I call them dark because they are very much filled with hate. And if you quantify the amount of hate there, you might probably see a difference between attacks, gendered attacks against Muslim women versus Muslim men. So, I'm not discarding your point about the quantity, but I'm just highlighting the limitation of my research.
Mhm.
So, going back to the impact, definitely there is a very clear uh, demarcation line that we have to draw about the psychological impact of hate on people. So we conducted another study about a journalist attacked with trolling, and when we looked at the data from a gendered perspective, we saw that women journalists would find that the attacks against them impacted their lives far more than men, and they radically changed the way they lived. When I interviewed, for instance, racialized Canadian journalists who are all female, I found that almost all of them had to go into treatment for mental health and so on, because they felt that it was too much to handle. So you see the impact on their lives and how they have radically changed the way they lived. When it comes to online behavior, you can see, for instance, a lot of people would refrain from even using social media. Like I personally left so many social media sites because sometimes you feel there is so much hatred. Other people would remove their contact details. For example, you can't find their email address. That's for a reason. It's not happening, let's say, randomly. They do it because they don't want to get hate emails. Or, for instance, you cannot reach them on Twitter. They disabled the messaging, let's say, mechanism via Twitter, only allowing their own contacts to message them. All of these are clear indicators of how people are changing their behavior in order to adapt. Other people feel even afraid of coming near the phones in some cases. But there are also, I really like that, there are also some creative ways by which people cope with hate. I remember, for instance, interviewing a female journalist who told me that um, she would not block people who send hate on Twitter, because once you block them, they get a notification saying, hey, someone has been blocked, correct? And what they do is that they make use of that message, I've been blocked, as a badge of honor. Hey, I made someone hate me so much that they feel they must block me. Instead, that journalist has a creative way. There is actually a mute option. Mute means you will not hear from them, but they can still post up, but you cannot see it. And this way, once they post, you as a receiver, you won't see anything, and they would think that they are just spreading hate freely. So I felt that was a very creative, innovative way by which they dealt with hate, so that they can cope. Sorry, I talked too much or elaborated too much.
No, it's great. And I think, I mean, if I could help contextualize some of your comments to like the average user of social media platforms, like I know it sounds like very simple for you to be like, oh, you're a journalist, you're gonna hide your email so that you don't get hate, or you mute people. But it does require a lot of personal effort, right? Which again is something that we've touched upon in previous sessions,
Yeah.
is that in order to protect yourself from hate, you have to take a lot of personal steps to make sure that it doesn't get to you. And that's extra work. That's extra labor beyond sort of your work, beyond your daily life. Instead of logging off and going and being with your family or taking a walk or whatever, you're going to spend a little extra time being online and making sure that everything is locked down. Or for instance, like I currently work at a publication which pays for a digital security firm. So it's like additional money to help, their reporters feel safe online. And I think, how do we translate those things to the average user? Because we're seeing a lot of just regular folks who aren't in positions like journalism or politics or business or in a speaker position, who are dealing with online hate just simply because of what they post online. Like in this current moment where a lot of us are engaging with online content relating to what's happening in Gaza, a lot of people are also getting hate for what they're posting. And I do want to go to Amira, but I want to give Dr. Al-Rawi an opportunity to address this, which is, how do we translate some of the solutions and the challenges that you found in your research in the political and journalism community to the average users?
Yeah, I mean, you pointed out excellent things regarding the steps that we have to take to protect ourselves. And no one has trained us to do so. Like, no one has told us that, hey, you've got to do this and that. It's not like a cookbook where you know how to make a meal. This is different, and the scene is evolving all the time. So the rules might change. Even if I, for instance, offer some normative procedures. Hey, you follow these steps, you will be fine. These steps might not work tomorrow. So that's a challenge. Two more things to just to complicate what you mentioned. We
Mm.
often think of the online sphere as separate from the offline real world. But today, I don't think there is such a distinction. Like, my phone is with me all the time. Like, I'm always connected online. So what happens there in the online realm, whatever you want to call it, the ethereal, whatever, actually has an impact on me, physiological impact. When I say physiological, which means my blood cells might boil, like I'm getting anxious or angry. And the other complication is that it's not an instantaneous thing, which means hate lingers. Like, I remember the kind of hate emails I got a couple of years ago, as if it happened yesterday. It lingers in the back of your mind and it impacts you, whether you want to negate it or not. It's there. You can remember all the details because it's bad and it has an impact on you. Even if you claim, I'm strong, no, I won't let them. That's okay. But still, you see that there it has an impact on you, even though you might deny it. Sorry,
So,
did I respond to your question? About,
I
you
mean,
asked me how to respond, right?
yeah.
Good question. I think talking is useful. Opening up to others who have experienced similar issues is so useful. I noticed that some female Canadian journalists would share the hate that they receive on Twitter. I respect that. It could be a way, but it could actually encourage other haters to do the same because they see that, hey, this journalist is listening to the hate. So why don't I do more or do something similar? So I question whether this is a good procedure. Maybe it's working for them, but I would share, like, that's what I personally have done. I'm not like a psychologist thing, but I would have approached colleagues also from racialized backgrounds and share with them this kind of hate, and that's where I find the solace. I find some comfort because they will get back to me usually on the same day with feedback, with empathy. This is what makes me go on. And another thing is that it actually sometimes encourages me to do more. So hate sometimes for me, it could be a mobilizing factor. Oh, you hate me for that? Just wait for me. I'll do more of that because I know I'm doing something good. And I know that those people are the bad actors are upset because I'm doing something good. So I'll do more of it because I want them to be more upset. So, sometimes it could work for my own interest. Again, my apologies for speaking too much.
Don't apologize. We're here to learn from you. Um, Amira, how did you cope? We talked about it, me and Dr. Al-Rawi talked about it in very abstract ways, but how did you cope when you got all that hate? And what kind of supports do you wish you had when you're sort of looking back at it?
um, I think in the moment, all you could do is try to survive it, to be honest. I really relate to what you guys are talking about, even though it's kind of high level. It's true though, we really made ourselves less accessible online. Some people straight up deleted their social medias. Um, a lot of us just kind of detached ourselves from the masjids because, online and in person is very connected when all the stuff is being said about you by peers and elders, including sometimes like the leaders themselves. It's very discouraging. So in the moment, honestly, the time was a blur from what I can remember. But we kind of just had to focus on the basics. We had to like try to detach from the internet. We were not really giving any responses because we thought, let's not give them more materials to work with. We reported the situation to whatever channels were available at the university. Of course, they wipe their, like, they shrug their shoulders and say, oh, that's not our business, even though it was very much violating student conduct codes and stuff. So yeah, I guess the way I coped was just survive. Put your head down and like get through it. We tried to reach out to different people who may have some insights about how to deal with online hate, because there really aren't policies in place or structures or groups in place to even tackle this stuff. So the best shot you do have is reaching out to others who have experienced the hate and are able to give you some advice. So that's what we did. Yeah. And oh yeah,
What
remember we also, at least I was one of the people who had to withdraw from school too. The impact was so severe on my health that I had to really just focus on my health. And then also got some medical treatment as well, which kind of, it makes me really upset to think about, because it's like, am I depressed and anxious, or am I navigating some serious intense hate out, like it's not, I hate that we've medicalized very normal reactions to such extreme levels of violence.
Mhm. And looking back, what do you wish you had available to you then? And like you basically told us that everything that Dr. Rawi and I did not help you. So what kind of support do you wish you had at that time?
I wish that more people had taken efforts to kind of reject what was happening and shut it down. So I guess on the peers level, I wish more people had just like commented and not let that sort of stuff fly online. And then also I wish that community elders and leaders had also sat people down that were perpetuating this and said, hey guys, what's happening? Stop it. I wish they'd reached out to us and checked in and saying what's going on. How can we support you? Even though, to be honest, when people ask, how can I support you? Some people did ask, and I'm grateful for that. But at the time, like, I didn't even know. And I still don't know, like, what supports are available to even be able to describe it, if that makes sense. Like, you don't know what you don't know. So, yeah, I guess I just wish people were not letting that stuff be normalized, because that was just too much normalizing and a lot of assuming that things were true when they weren't. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so hard to hear because I remember when I got my first piece of hate mail, it was in 2016, and I was not even a professional journalist yet. I was just graduating journalism school when I got it. Um, and everything that you described, that reaction, the lack of institutional support, the not knowing who to turn to, and even when people turn to, not knowing what to ask of them. But over the years, because I think journalists have started sharing the hate that they received, there seemed to be like a massive education of the entire community of what was going on. So why are these few racialized journalists getting so much hate? The rest of us not aren't. And it started becoming a conversation. We started getting educated, and then we started thinking about it from an institutional perspective. What can we offer journalists to help them? How do we speak to social media companies to mitigate some of this? It's so funny when you guys were talking, I was looking, I've muted like 50 people, and I just went to go check, and yeah, they still send the occasional hate message and I don't see it. So, but that's not a permanent solution, right? Like I guess Dr. Rawi, maybe you can start by talking about this. Amira highlighted this really important problem, which is it seems like there's still a lack of awareness and education in our communities about the impacts and spread of hate and how it actually impacts us and what we can do to help. And I wondered if there are practical ways where we can encourage more of that. How can we get communities understanding what's happening online and how it impacts what's happening offline to us?
That's an excellent question. I like, again, I'm not talking on behalf of the Muslim community. I cannot. I'm originally from Iraq, so even my Iraqi community is divided. So I'll talk about my experiences living in the country and what they think about this issue. Usually, it's about enhancing the feeling of strength. So if you face such things, you've got to be patient, strong, and hold on. You don't even need sometimes to share these views because you are strong. I don't think this is the right strategy. We are vulnerable people. It's like, even by the way, men are like very vulnerable. They rarely cry, and this is a problem. This is a huge problem for men, and it breaks them from inside. And for women, it's the same thing. We have the shame concept, shaming. So we tend to avoid talking about these negative things in order to not be shamed. And I've seen this in our communities, unfortunately. So it's a cultural thing. It's a cultural issue. There is also fear from being seen as someone complaining all the time. So there are a few values that seem to be good values, but they are actually not working well, especially dealing with these issues. Um, yeah, I hope I address your question, Fatima. You muted, sorry.
It's fair. Sometimes there aren't solutions, and I guess that's why we're having this conversation, is so that we can try and educate members of the community, and then they can educate members of the community, and it can hopefully sort of spread that way. Um, Amira, have you seen any evolution in community understanding since what happened to you and your friends and colleagues?
Um, I'm not sure, to be honest, because the people who were at the time really like defending us and trying to say, hey, like stop it, these things aren't true. Like they have kind of remained the same, and I'm grateful for that. But in terms of like the others, they just believe what they want to. So I can't say there's been a real shift. I think something that was just as hurtful was there were actually quite a lot of people that were witnessing what was happening, mortified, and chose not to do or say anything anyways. Like they kind of just
Mm.
turned away from it, which is to me just as useless or harmful. So um yeah, I'm not sure of how much the understanding has grown because I've literally removed myself from Muslim spaces. So I yeah, I just don't really associate.
Dr. Rawi wants to add something.
Yeah, I mean, this is very important because it clearly shows you the misogynistic views and attitudes towards women. So basically, here they are saying that it's the woman's fault for being present on social media, and they should go elsewhere. They should do something else. I don't know, cooking, whatever. That's the patriarchal mindset that we can still see. That's probably explains why there was silence when others witnessed the hate directed towards the speaker, Amira. And it's very sad, but it shows also that there are still a lot of challenges and problems that we have in our own community. Second, when it comes to this, that there is lack of literacy and understanding on how these tools work.
Yeah.
Like, I haven't seen, for example, in Canada, influential Muslim thinkers who are using social media or TikTok in order to reach more people. I haven't seen that. It seems that it looks like the social media part and online, let's say, tools are not well utilized by them, or they probably feel they should overlook them, or they should avoid them in a way or so. So I don't think we are still in the infancy stages, unfortunately, unlike other communities, on other religious communities.
Yeah, I'd say
Amir,
the
do
media
you want to add
literacy
something?
thing is so important. Um,
Yeah.
one person reached out, like one community leader I remember had taken the time to reach out and check in about the situation. And as well intentioned as he was, he just did not understand. He didn't have that media literacy. He didn't understand how the online and in person worlds are very connected, if not the same. So, because he's from an older generation and he didn't seem to be using internet and social media like that. So I really think even if he wanted to support, he wasn't able to because he didn't understand it. So yeah, media literacy, very
Yeah,
important.
I think the argument we often hear from elders in the Muslim community, particular, is like, don't be that much online. Like, reduce the time that you spend online, or don't post that much. Being online is like the devil. Like, it don't just, don't be there. Focus on being outside or whatever. Um, I think there is a disconnect, and I do wonder, and maybe research down the line by Dr. Al-Rawi will tell us maybe if the pandemic shifted that, because so many mosques and so many communities had to learn to be online as because we were disconnected physically, and whether that is helping them understand what these spaces mean and how to interact with them carefully. Amir and Dr. Rawi, you both also mentioned just an absence of policy, both at an institutional and a broader level. And I know last week, yeah, it was last week, right? Or was it earlier this week? They released online hate legislation. Time is such a construct. And Dr. Rawi, I wondered if you thought that that piece of legislation will solve any of these challenges that we're talking about.
I mean, I'm laughing because, in an ironic way, of course, because as I started the talk, saying that hate has been there since the emergence of Islam. So I don't think this so-called Online Harms Act will do anything. It's the people. Remember, we might blame social media for being like responsible for what is happening. It's not actually social media, it's the people posting on social media. So remember, it's there are humans behind all of this kind of hate. That's where our problem is. Talking about Islamophobia, it's very even mainstream these days. It's been there for a while, but Islamophobia is mainstreamed. Like, I give you one example. Bill Maher. Bill Maher has this well-known, very famous, popular talk show, and most of the time he talks about Islam in a very disparaging, negative way. And that's mainstream. This is one of the most popular TV presenters in the US, well-known even globally. And when he talks about women, for example, showing them victims of the circumstances, oppressed simply because they were wearing the hijab. So the hijab is also used, of course, as a rationale for attacking a Muslim woman, showing them as weak, and that the West should step in order to rescue them from the oppressors. So all of that shows you the kind of colonial mindset and racist, as well as misogynistic ideas about Islam and Muslim women. And it's very sad to see this, the way it's being mainstreamed.
Amira, do you think that the online harms legislation will help at all?
Sadly, no, I don't. I mean, I'm not a researcher or anything, but I do understand that technology is biased because the people who make it are biased. So from my understanding, this bill is, I know they say it's to protect the children, but we all know it's going to be censoring Muslims, and Muslims, including the ones trying to raise awareness about things like Palestine, which we're already seeing like extreme censorship with. So I think this is just going to make it even worse. Yeah, so I'm not sure how this is going to play out within the Muslim community itself, but I can already feel the extra censorship and stuff coming.
This conversation is very, very defeatist, you guys. We need to find some solutions to give people hope.
Can I say
Yes,
something
Dr.
here?
Ryan.
Yes. So I did have a look at the Online Harms Act a few days ago, and I was like very interested to see a few things. For example, the act talks about the need to stop people from it says fermenting hatred. Okay, and I wanted to see how hatred is defined. It says hatred is an emotion that invokes detestation or vilification and is stronger than disdain or dislike. Notice here, it's supposed to be stronger than disdain or dislike. Okay, how can you quantify hate? How could a judge or a committee distinguish between dislike on the one hand or disdain on the one hand and detesting someone? Like, how is that? Is there, for example, a line separating between these two? Because according to that, if they can do that, they will be able to, for example, charge someone and then take that person to prison. This is impossible. Conceptually, theoretically, empirically, whatever you want to call it, there is no way you can do that. Unless, of course, it's very subjective and very qualitative. Another thing about this online act, which made me laugh, honestly, is the phrase about advocating genocide. Advocating for genocide. So the punishment for advocating genocide is what? Is life imprisonment. That's awesome, right? But the problem is that genocide against whom? And it says, for instance, they talk about the public. Okay, are we talking about the Canadian public or the wider public, the global public? We really don't know. Because, for example, in Canada, there are some news organizations spreading hate about Muslims and others abroad. So they start from here, but they spread abroad. Would that be counted? What about, genocide against Palestinians? Will people who support genocide against Palestinians face life imprisonment? I don't think so. But so see, there are so many question marks, and I don't know how this act will help if we don't even know what hatred is it looks like or is defined.
I think what's interesting is, oftentimes it feels like this is too big of a problem for us to address. But perhaps we talked a lot about education, and maybe that's where we can find some success, which is if we actually teach both our kids and our elders and people of all generation, genuinely help them understand how social media and being online works. A couple of sessions ago, we talked about, the need to post with purpose and to share heart speech, not hate speech. And I wonder if there are organizations that you've seen in your research, Dr. Al-Rawi, that are doing this, that are sort of teaching people, maybe especially in the Muslim community, how to be better users of online. Oh no, he's shaking his head. I was going for a hopeful question.
No, we don't have in Canada. It's like, honestly, very poor when it comes to this, very much information poor. We don't have this kind of training. I wish I could be involved in it if there is an initiative, or you're on that kind of initiative, or CCMW. There is the Countering Cyber Hate workshops. I was not aware of that. But I don't think it's like that widespread. But we need more of it for sure. And just to add, Fatma, when you talk about hate on social media, it's not only the text, right? Because we have different forms of hate we rarely talk about. I give you one example, and I was shocked to see that kind of example. When we think of emojis, we might laugh. Oh, emojis are fun. It's nice. We express ourselves without writing any words, right? But when I looked at, for example, the hashtag #FIslam or #Muslims, which is very popular on, for example, Twitter, I was shocked to see that a lot of people were using a series of emojis to express genocide, especially against or directed at Muslim women. So let me give you an example. So what they do, for instance, instead of just posting text, which could be easily detected if, of course, Instagram is interested or Facebook is interested or Twitter, they would actually post a series of emojis of one veiled woman. Beside it will be a knife, and then beside it a bomb, and beside it a gun directed at the veiled Muslim woman. So we have now a series of 5 emojis, one after the other, all expressing hatred and animosity against Muslim women. Specifically, when it comes to visible Muslims, and we talk about here veiled Muslim women. So we can see a clear indicator. Or, for example, they would add an emoji of Kaaba, Mecca, and a bomb or a rocket, and just to say that everyone should die. All of this should be destroyed. Again, it's supposed to be fun for them. It's supposed to be amusing for comedic purposes, but of course there is very sinister, serious indication of killing as well as genocide against Muslims, specifically targeting women.
Yeah, it definitely manifests in strange and multi kinds of formats. Um, Amira, I'm wondering if, you know, when we talked about this earlier, you talked a lot about how, well, we discussed chatting about, you know, what steps need to be taken to prevent what happened to you happening to any others. And I know it's still happening to people like other Muslim women constantly, even probably now as we speak. But walk us through sort of, you know, when you think about this, what steps can we take as a society to prevent this happening again?
I think there needs to be a huge culture shift, because culture shift in person does, it does translate to the online world too. So I guess it could look like diversifying programming in Muslim spaces, try to incorporate more stuff about media literacy, like how to determine if things are, I don't know, if something is presented to you, how do you determine if it's true or not? Or think about what's the source coming from. It can also help Muslims not internalize as much of the hatred as well. But I think a lot of educational programming and like leadership, good leadership would solve or help solve a lot of this and prevent hatred from festering so much. Um, like, yeah, I was just thinking about what you guys are saying. I don't really think of many Muslim spaces that are using it like tech very well. I guess I could think of the Yaqeen Institute and like stuff like that, but even those are not interactive. They're we need things like workshops. Like, I don't know. These are just ideas though. I have no concrete solutions, obviously, but I do think education is definitely a tool to be used.
I want to open up to questions soon with the audience. Dr. Al-Rawi wants to say something, but yeah, if you have questions, start thinking about them, and then we'll open it up for a broader discussion.
Yeah, I mean, two things. One about hate and how it's become mainstream and normalized these days. So sometimes even for Muslims, seeing hate on social media, it's become just like a customary thing. Honestly, sometimes I watch the news and see a lot of Islamophobia on TV news. So it's really saddening, especially following the attack in Gaza. So it's so sad to see all of this happening. Talking about solutions, I think I agree with Amira about media education. It's really important. But if you think of it, I mean, you can conceptualize solutions into three main areas: the content itself, community solutions, and legislative solutions. Three areas. So when it comes to content, I think social media sites should do far more than what they are doing today in order to moderate content, hateful content on their sites. And they can also make use of the people on social media who could report the hateful content. Though of course it could be weaponized, which means others who you know who do not like you might report you just for fun. So that's the level of content. The second one is community. That's where media education comes. But I would just want to highlight media education is not like a magic key. It will not solve everything. You know, a lot of people who post hate on social media are very educated, by the way. Like I know professors in Canada who post so much Islamophobic content that I don't know how this university would even allow them to continue working there. But it's just, this is the case. This is what we have today. So for community, it could be through fact-checking organizations. You guys, you do the work, you journalists, you are the gatekeepers. You fact-check also information, like filter them, and also educators. who deliver workshops on, disinformation literacy and so on. The third one will be legislative, like, for instance, social media as well as government would work together in doing two things. One, in providing clearer guidelines about what to post and what not to post on social media. Second, on working together in inking certain acts, or let's say laws, that are clear for everyone. Again, the Online Harms Act that I just told you about defines hatred in a very vague way, and I don't know how this could be understood by people. If I cannot understand it, how could people figure this out? So it has to be clear about when it comes to the red lines that people should not cross. Yeah, thank you.
See, I like that. I like the three buckets. And I think those are very hard buckets to fulfill. Before I open it up for questions, um, it's so funny while we're having this conversation, I was actually thinking about who my first troll was, and it was actually from someone from the Muslim community, which I hadn't put together until now. So this is definitely an interesting conversation, and I hope people have learned a lot from it. Um, I do want to end on a positive note though. But maybe we could take some questions and then I can ask my fun positive questions so we can end out with some hope and laughter. Nizat, you have your hand up, so let's go for a question.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And I really, really appreciated the whole conversation. It was very interesting, lots of very helpful ideas, but also, Amira, I heard a lot of pain. So I want to acknowledge that. I'm sorry, I hope you were not re-traumatized. I'm sure you were, sharing your experiences, but you were brave to share it. And I want to assure you that this space is a brave space. This is a safe space. CCMW is a very safe organization for Muslim women. And, the reason why we exist is because of the misogyny within our own communities. We have experienced it, from within our own communities, but we survive. And the reason why we survive is for spaces like this one. We create spaces where women can share their pain, their experiences. And by the way, CCMW is vilified all the time in our communities. Um, I don't know, Iman is not here. She moderates our social media platforms. A lot of the hate we get actually comes from fellow Muslims. We do get, the negative posts from the broader Canadian population, but because of our feminist approach, our inclusive approach, and because we tackle issues like gender-based violence, for instance, or family law, people don't like us. So that, those kinds of things within the community are always there. But I mentioned in the chat that we offer those countering cyber hate workshops, and we welcome you to check out the workshop. We have it on our daretobeheur.ca website, but also attend one of them. Everyone who's here can attend one of our workshops, because we provide tips, on what to do, how to protect yourself online, what counter speech looks like if you want to engage in it, what campaigns look like if you want to engage as a community or as a group to counter the hate that you've received. So we do some of that, and there are other organizations which we will hopefully hear from in another of these episodes later on. But I just wanted to say to you that there aren't a lot of spaces, there aren't a lot of places for Muslim women, but this one is one. And I'm really glad that you shed light on the gendered nature of the hate, but the fact that Ahmed, you use the word quality. It's the viciousness of the hate towards women that is alarming, because of course that physically Muslim women are assaulted and attacked in the street, especially if they're visible by their clothing. So it's it's that viciousness that is distinct when it comes to Muslim women. And the same is true in the online spaces. So, I'm really grateful to you for highlighting the gendered nature and um, the seriousness of the assault on women, whether it's online or in person, compared to Muslims, non-visible Muslim women as well as Muslim men. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing, Nazat. If anyone else has questions, if you don't want to speak, you can put them in the chat and I can ask on your behalf. Or you can just raise your hand. But I know Dr. Al-Rawi wants to respond.
Yes, thank you, Nuzhat. And actually, just to add about the viciousness, I also found the far right, usually it's predominantly Christian, conservative Christian, they also tend to viciously attack visible Muslim women, viciously. Again, they use misogynistic, very much hateful comments in order to um, vilify a woman and show that they want to communicate the idea that they do not belong in that space or even in Canada as a whole. And that's the strategy that they use. They want to make them feel alienated, hated, and in a way so that they encourage them to, for example, have low self-esteem or not respect themselves, or even leave the platform. So all of these are strategies, and I'm hoping that people can resist these strategies because we've got to know the goals behind these hateful strategies, especially targeting visible Muslim women. Thank you.
Yeah, I think Amira said in our planning discussion that it's like taking the red pill. Amira?
Yeah. Do you want to explain what the red pill is though? Like it's like a
I think you should do it. I think you should explain this. It was your theory and I love it.
um okay, correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I understand, the red pill, it's a reference to the Matrix, the movie. And it's like you take this pill, the blue or the red, you take the red one and it awakens you, like clears your vision. And unfortunately, it's turned into this thing where men from all communities all around the world have swallowed this red pill and are awakening. And I don't know, it's a very violently misogynist ideologies that kind of men from all over the place bond over, which is why I just put in the chat. It is really strange seeing Muslim men aligning themselves with the far right, like white supremacists that normally don't like Muslims, but they're bonding over misogyny. And you see this across cultures too. And it's very layered too. Like yes, there's the gendered violence, but honestly, in our community, we see the gendered violence. It was mainly like the ones who were targeted in the example I shared earlier. It was the Black Muslim girls and women were the ones that were kind of vocally and publicly supporting this another girl who was dealing with misogyny. And that's why they wanted to like kind of make an part of why they wanted to make an example out of us. So it really has been like Black Muslim women in particular that have been dealing with like extra heightened levels of violence, even the ones that are assaulted on the streets and stuff. A lot of them, like in Edmonton, it's Black Muslim women. So yeah, the red pill ideology permeates everywhere. So I don't know. I hope I explained that properly, but it's definitely in our spaces too. And people need to realize it's not just the internet.
Yeah, it's as Dr. Rawi said at the beginning, it's, what is offline is what's online. They are mirror reflections of each other. And if we are better as human beings, we will be better online as well as offline. If there are no more questions, I'll just keep asking questions. One thing I've been thinking about is one thing I've been thinking about a lot is, you know, how to almost make social media less scary. Not because of the hate that lives there, but sometimes it feels like it's too big for us to change or for us to even think about or learn about. And I think for our communities, especially, we use it for fun, but when it comes to actually understanding the mechanics of it and understanding how to use it well, we often feel like it's too big for us. And I wonder if, in part of the education aspects that we were talking about, whether either you have any thoughts on how to make it less like a monster that can't be defeated.
Fatima, is this question for me or?
Either of you, whoever, yeah.
Okay. Amira, do you want to go first?
Sure. I guess I would encourage people to plug yourself into online spaces that actually make you feel good. So the internet is definitely huge, but if you're following things that interest you, like your hobbies, communities that you can join, sometimes even anonymously if you prefer, that provide each other like insights and tips, or just spaces for joy, because we need that too, or spaces to talk about religion without the red pill men talking in the comments. Just to be able to have those discussions amongst ourselves, it's helpful.
Yeah, I agree with Amira about this issue. Try to find your safe zone, your safe space. It could be a closed Facebook group, for instance, not necessarily, for instance, let's say Twitter, or it could be a WhatsApp group. So try to find your own safe space where you can thrive and speak freely, as well as share similar experiences without feeling threatened. It requires some kind of trial and error. It requires some kind of time, but I'm quite sure you will find that place. And it's important to be online. Psychologically, it's useful to be online, listen to other people's worries and concerns, compare your own selves with them, try to be also entertain a bit. It's useful for you. So, removing yourself from these online spaces might not be useful. It's important to be active on them. There is the club. What's it called? I have it here. Club, something club. Give me a second. There is
The app?
the
Club?
app here.
I think it's called Clubhouse.
Clubhouse, yes. The
Yeah.
Clubhouse is another
It's
one
like
where you can have debates and discussions among people who are like-minded. That could be another safe zone. It's a mobile app. Or it could be something else you find online. But it's important that it's a safe place where you do not get attacked for no reason just because you are a Muslim.
For those who have a question.
Yes, I have a question for Dr. Ahmed actually, is that, if you can speak a little bit more about internalized Islamophobia and, how it impacts us all. I have young sons actually who are in their 30s now and who grew up in the post 9/11 era. And, the impact was so much being bullied and, name called in high school that they actually have totally walked away from their Muslim identity. So in a way, they don't relate, and even when they talk about Muslims, the language that is used is those Muslims, so trying to kind of move away from this. And I know that 9/11 had a huge impact on many, but more on our Muslim kids who sometimes sadly have absolutely alienated their identities. So anything that you can share?
Yeah, thank you so much for this excellent question, Firdaus. I totally agree with you. It's a real thing. It happens, and it has an actual direct impact on Muslims' lives for a reason. And I think the people who waged the war on terror, so-called war on terror, are probably a bit, satisfied that this is happening. A lot of Muslims are. I cannot quantify them, but some Muslims have actually taken measures to whitewash their names, whitewash their identities, and also step away from Islam. It's a sad thing. Listen, no one wants trouble, right? So if Islam brings trouble, they would probably become less Muslim, or let's say become an atheist or secular. It happens. It's like a psychological reaction against an event. I remember, for instance, when ISIS emerged, 2014, That was another era during which many Muslim friends actually had that kind of internalized Islamophobia, started blaming Islam for the emergence of ISIS instead of blaming the social and political circumstances that created that group, including the U.S. invasion of Iraq and the results that happened afterwards. These are all like expected to happen. How to go about it? I think there are so many ways to go about it. Number one, we do not have one Islam. We have many Islams. The mainstream Islam is definitely lenient and somehow liberal, and that's what we need. We need to promote that kind of mainstream Islam where there is openness to different types of Islam and also acceptance of different views. Unfortunately, I mean, today's discussion, Amira mentioned this a few times. Fatima also said that. Unfortunately, there is some kind of rigidness, strictness among many Muslim leaders, creating also some kind of let's say, animosity among some, mainstream Muslims. I don't think this works anymore. There has to be more acceptance of different views so that people would find that the mainstream Islam is more open to them and their ideas, especially living in the West. I hope I'm not digressing here.
You're okay. You're answering the question.
Okay, perfect. So so there has to be some kind of soul searching. We have to look inside well, and also try to reforms, like try to encourage reforming some of the Muslim leaders. Unfortunately, we still have the baby boomers, the old Muslim leaders. I think the newer generation, especially those raised in the West, might bring more hope. I am hoping that this will be the case. People are more open to different ideas. Again, similar to what I said before about looking inward, we still have a lot of divisions among the Muslim community. Again, I'm from Iraq. The first thing people ask me is, am I Sunni or Shia? Are you kidding me? Is this the real thing now? Is this the important thing? And of course, you have other groups vilifying others. So this is what people are preoccupied with instead of being unified. So there are still challenges within. Unfortunately, even this kind of sectarian divisions could result in more internalized Islamophobia. It's not only what happened, the major events like Firdaus mentioned, 9/11 or ISIS. It's also these divisions. People get to feel that they don't want to belong to the community.
Thank you.
Amira, do you want to add anything from like a different perspective to that question?
Can you repeat the question?
It was just like, a lot of people, especially after 9/11, experiencing the kind of hate that, that generation of young people have experienced, have sort of internalized Islamophobia and sort of stepped away from the community.
Yeah.
Is there anything we can do to draw them back in?
I see. Yeah, that's a great question. I think honestly, I personally relate to that a lot. Like there were some points like Alhamdulillah I never got there, but at some point I really was considering is this the religion for me? And it was a lot of it had to do with not just the external Islamophobia, but the violence within the community too, like during my teenage years. So, but some things that really helped me personally come back is like learning what Islam was really about. There's a lot of emphasis on justice, and I really appreciated that, like environmental and just the kindness and like the grace we're supposed to give each other, and how much like mercy Allah has for us. So I think just learning more and teaching more. I agree. The Muslim community leaders, they need to diversify their khutbahs and the halaqas. Not every day is hijab. Not every day is you're going to hell. Like they need to diversify it. So I think if we touched on the things like the Prophet, peace be upon him, they never really shied away, and that's how they never shied away from the hard conversations. I think if we stopped shying away from the difficult conversations, we'd have an easier time just existing as a community. So just having spaces for these conversations is really important.
It's so funny when Firdaus described her sons, and I'm like, wait, that's me too. Because I'm of the same generation. I'm in my I'm in my 30s. Grew up in the shadow of 9/11, all of that.
Yeah.
And I think for me, the struggle that I have is I don't turn to our community for help
Yeah.
as a first because I've never gotten it. Like not in like, when I received online hate, that's not the first community that stepped up to help me. It was actually Black journalists who stepped up to help me first and foremost. And I think that's a problem that we don't have each other's backs because we're so rooted in our divisions and our boundaries and our sex and so forth. And I think as members of the community, we have a responsibility to actually challenge our leaders and members and elders and young people to do that. I don't I agree with Dr. Al-Rawi. Removing yourself from the situation is not an answer. It's actually challenging it that will make it better. But to that end, seeing the time and seeing no, oh, there is one more question from Firdaus before I ask my last question. Dr. Al-Rawi, did your research show you anything that you didn't know, anything that surprised you?
Thank you so much for this excellent question. I'm not sure which aspect. I did a lot of research about a few things, so it depends on which topic, but there is always something exciting. It's like in journalism, right? When you break a news story, you feel so excited. If Firdaus can clarify, is that about online hate?
Yes, I think pertaining to online hate, digital hate, and you also mentioned you're doing a current study. So anything that really caught you by surprise, because sometimes we go in with assumptions or we know the community, that's what we feel.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's an excellent question. So I'm doing a study about mediated racism in Canada, which is a SSHRC-funded project. SSHRC is the Social Science and Humanities Research Council, whereby I'm interviewing racialized Canadians to understand their perception of and response towards racism and how racism could have an impact on democracy, which means if you received racist attacks or experience racist attacks, are you more likely to vote or be part of the democratic process, or would you refrain and just stay at home? So I'm trying to tackle this. So going back to Firdaus' question, what surprised me was that when I interviewed racialized Canadian politicians, as well as journalists, long time before, just many months before the Gaza attack, October 7th, many of them actually talked about the issue of Palestine. And I felt surprised because what's the connection? But they were saying that when it comes to Palestine, they feel a bit limited, restrained, and confined. And even I'm talking about politicians here. So I was surprised that, like the issue of Palestine has been censored, even among politicians. It's not only the journalist. And then the Gaza attack happened, and I saw it in my front, in front of me, how the issue of Palestine has been censored, not only on social media, but also in the news industry. Like the plight of Palestinians was not really well covered, if ever covered, in fact, which was super disappointing. So that was surprising for me when it comes to the research. Yeah, thank you.
I want to end on a moment of joy and we've been doing this for the last few sessions because we talk so much about the darkest corners of the internet and its impact. I do want to remind everyone that the internet can be a great space. And both Amira and Dr. Al-Rawi mentioned this just a little bit ago, that there is space online to find community, to find education, to find knowledge, to find laughter. And it's been so fun to do this. So I want to continue this tradition. So, can I ask you both for something that's brought you joy online in like recent days or weeks? Dr. Al-Rawi, you go first.
Me? Okay. It's actually TikTok. I love TikTok. Especially the hashtag I stand with Palestine. I love that. And I really love the way the people are interacting from different backgrounds and, of course, ethnicities and races. I love that. This is the, I end my day just a few, like half an hour just watching these TikTok videos, which brings me a lot of pleasure and hope in humanity because I had some times, some moments that I lost hope in humanity, but I saw a lot of good videos on TikTok. Though, mind you, if you type or search the hashtag Islamophobia or Islamophobic, it's actually blocked on TikTok for some reason. That's another research study, which is surprising.
Watch
Going back,
this space.
yeah, going back to Ferdow's question about what is surprising, that's actually surprising for me because the hashtag Islamophobia is available or could be posted on Instagram and Twitter, but the algorithm used now on TikTok does not allow you to post a hashtag with Islamophobia and Islamophobic. I wonder why. I would love to know.
That's pretty cool. Amira, what's brought you joy online in recent days or weeks?
I like several things to be honest. I use the internet a lot to find different community spaces and like then attend them in person. So finding things has been really helpful. Also seeing, yeah, social media like TikTok and Instagram, seeing people, especially Muslim women, doing very regular things like skateboarding or fashion or authors sharing their writing. I love that stuff. So it's just nice to know like we very much have regular lives, and I love seeing Muslim women just enjoy that too.
I love that. Mine for today is I have two actually. One is related to what we were talking about is I think there is a shift happening. I think there are like I am part of a lot of like groups now where people are saying this person is getting a lot of online hate. Please go and support them. Please go check their mentions, mute them, or please go send letters of support so that their institution can support them. And I think it's really nice to see regular people and organizations step up and recognize that they need to rally together to combat hate, which is great. And I hope it continues beyond this moment, that it's not just related to what's happening in Palestine and our post on Palestine, but about everything, because that's how we make a better community. And then the other thing is I have a friend in Montreal. Her name is Gabrielle Drolet. She's a journalist and illustrator, and for every day this month, she's been drawing a rat, which is her favorite animal. I know that sounds strange, but the rats are really cute, and her drawings are really cute. So if you scroll down her Twitter, the illustrations are really nice, and they bring me a lot of joy. And I just posted her last one today, in the chat for you all to check out. Um, Thank you so much for joining us for another evening for this very heavy discussion. I hope you can all take a break from being online for a little bit and then come back and participate. Um, and we're gonna have, I think, a couple more ahead, which Nazat will tell you about. But thank you so much for listening to me and Dr. Rawi and Amira.
Great. So thank you, Fatima, for amazing conversation, leading the conversation, moderating, and to Dr. Al-Rawi and to Amira. It was a great conversation. I learned a lot. Lots of food for thought. You talked about joy, and I can tell you, CCMW brings me a lot of joy. A couple of weekends ago for Black History Month, we had an amazing event featuring, great speakers, comedians who could make us laugh, celebrating Black Muslims. And we've been doing that all month. That's why I mentioned our Instagram page. If you want to bring a smile to your face, go check out CCMW National Instagram page, and you'll see, the kinds of things we post. And another thing that's going to bring you joy, Amira, please join us for this event, as we are, for International Women's Day, we're holding a session called In Their Voice, Muslim Women in Literature. We're going to be featuring Muslim women who are associated with CCMW in some way or another, reading their poetry and their writings. Again, it will bring joy, and I'm sure it'll bring some tears too, because we'll always have Gaza and Palestine, in the back of our minds as we do that. So thank you again for attending this evening. Our next session, our next In Conversation episode will take place on March 14th, and it's focusing on educators. It's going to be called Educating Our Educators, and we'll have some folks that are really specialists in educating people like media smarts, especially kids on the use of social media, and then another group called Digital Public Square that's done a lot of work online in doing a lot of counter speech and education around different topics and the effective use of social media. So I think that's the end of our session. It's 7:29. We did very well. Thank you for keeping us on time, Fatima. Please do check us out on our social media platforms and visit our main website, ccmw.com, but also our microsite, daretobeaware.ca, for all our anti-Islamophobia and anti-racism resources. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, folks. Thanks.